For this project, I have decided to speak on the issue of gun control in Texas, as I believe it to be one of the, if not the most, prevalent issues in our state. As presented in this satirical political cartoon, the problem is out of control, but barely being handled and reduced to thoughts and prayers and suggestions that end up in the trash. Not just to Texas, but to the entirety of the United States, gun control has been a rising issue. However, specifically in Texas, our government seems to be against gun control, which makes it a very specific issue for the state. Although COVID-19 has also been a very pressing issue for our state, the pro-gun climate of Texas takes a front seat with the rising news of mass shootings. Take, for example, within the last 2 days, the Texas House has approved a bill that allows open carry of handguns without a permit. This is not typically the news you would like to hear, considering the Indiana mass shooting that occurred not a few days earlier that killed 9 people on April 15th. As of current, this is what the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, has to say about gun control. Last session, I signed 10 laws to protect gun rights in Texas. This session, we need to erect a complete barrier against any government office anywhere from treading on gun rights in Texas. Texas must be a Second Amendment sanctuary state. This is ironic considering since 2013, more Texans have believed there should be stricter gun laws in comparison to those who want them left as is or stricter, according to a poll taken by the University of Texas and the Texas Tribune. Therefore, it is clear that Abbott's bias is influenced not by the general public, but by his political party or at least his right-wing lean. So seems to be the trend among conservative states who have a history of praising the Second Amendment and protecting it to a wit's end. Within the recent years, few gun control laws have been applied in Texas. In fact, for the most part they have loosened and made guns more available to the general public. This is concerning to say the least, as there has been no evidence in an end to the madness of mass shootings. Taking a step back from our state, it is important to understand the weight of the problem as a whole and how it is affecting the country. According to the Gun Violence Archive, a nonprofit organization based in Washington, there has been 147 mass shootings in the United States in 2021 alone, which is more than the amount of shootings we had at this time in 2020, but less than the ones in 2019. Despite the ever-expanding list of gun shootings going down in history, likewise as Texas, little federal legislation has been passed to prevent them. This is due to the everlasting debate between pro-gun advocates and gun control supporters. Democrats and left-leaning individuals tend to lean towards stricter gun laws, while Republicans and conservatives believe the opposite. In this presentation, I will address both sides of the conflict with a bias towards anti-gun laws, as I support gun control heavily. For starters, the common belief of pro-gunners is that the accessibility of guns and the right to carry arms is a constitutional right, as mentioned in the Second Amendment. That group of individuals loves to preach and put the amendment on a pedestal, but fail to recognize the context in which the right was put into place. While the law was put into place to, yes, prevent a monarch from rising to power and abusing said power, the primary motive was to prevent the country from needing a standing army and maintaining the militia of the time, which we all know is very different from the current gun control debate. More interestingly, and not to my surprise, the right to bear arms is racially exclusionary and mainly tolerates white Americans carrying guns. This covers a bigger issue altogether, which I do not have time to address, but is important to recognize. The belief of many pro-gun supporters is that taking away guns will not make the country safer, only leave the public vulnerable. Some push the blame of these mass shootings on violent video games that influence our youth or untreated mental health disorders. The argument of violent video games has been disproven by many psychologists. However, mental health is a factor towards many mass shooters, and has been discussed in Congress, though not acted on. On the flip side, gun protesters argue that without access to semi-auto guns, mentally unstable individuals at least wouldn't be able to cause as much harm. To support this claim, take a look at New Zealand, who has banned semi-auto pistols and rifles in addition to tightening many gun control laws. The country decided to make this action following a 2019 terrorist attack at a mosque that killed 51 Muslim worshippers. Since the law were put into place, they have not experienced another mass shooting. Hearing the statistics can be depressing and discouraging. Oftentimes seeing so many headlines detailing yet another mass shooting makes me feel despair. However, it is valuable to hold on to hope. Many organizations are working towards advocating gun control, and protests commonly take place after especially tragic shootings, such as the Dayton and El Paso shootings from 2019, where people called for ex-President Trump to take action. Speaking of Trump, now with him gone, there is more chance for gun control laws people have so desperately been asking for. President Biden already has a plan intact, which he has yet to follow through, but has addressed and brought to light to Congress. His plan details banning the manufacture and sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and buying back said assault weapons. While this is a good start, I would suggest taking a step further to ban owning assault weapons, including semi-automatics, and of course buying them back as Biden plans. I would also want Texas to go along with this plan willingly and not start a riot to fight for guns that barely hold any value in the scenes where guns are deemed necessary. For example, semi-automatic guns have no place in sport hunting, as the weapons are not practical for such activity. And as for our protection, automatic weapons pose the problem of a widespread range of fire that could hit unfortunate targets. Simple handguns and hunting rifles are much more reasonable. Referring to the graphic displayed in the slide, I would like to address the fact that Afghanistan, whom we have occupied for almost 20 years during the War on Terror, has less rates of violent gun deaths than the U.S. The United States likes to consider the Middle East some of the most dangerous countries, which is understandable and truthful. However, we are very far from being better than them, at least in this case. Therefore, since the United States likes to consider themselves on higher moral ground, it would only be sensible to take some action against gun violence we experience. With that concludes my argument as to why Texas and the United States as a whole needs to seriously consider gun control laws, as I know I'd rather not fear for my life when I go to the mall or a school. Thank you for listening.